Hi, everyone. Welcome. Bienvenidos. Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches.
Welcome. Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are.
Hi, Nico. Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Zaina, welcome. Bienvenidos. Bienvenue. Fireflies. If as you're joining in, please, if you can just rename yourself.
Hello.
Hi, sign up.
Hi. How are you?
Good. So we have multiple interpretation. I'm gonna switch in the beginning of the presentation in Spanish, but for now, I'm just welcoming folks. Hey, Danielle. Welcome. Colleen, welcome. Bienvenue.
Merci, bonjour.
Jenny, bienvenue. Hola, Jenny, ¿cómo estás? Bienvenida.
Hola.
Shane, welcome. Wyden, welcome. Aditya, Carrie. Getting folks in slowly. So if you can please rename yourself with your name, pronouns if you want, and English, French, or Spanish, depending. That would help us to do a little bit of the breakout rooms. Voy a cambiar a español, ya que la charla
I'll switch into Spanish now, since everything will be held in Spanish today. We have interpretation available. You can find the icon at the bottom of your screen. So first of all, change your name, rename yourself. You can use your preferred pronoun, and you can write English, Spanish, French. Please choose your preferred language, well, English, French, or Spanish. I missed the Spanish. And yes, slides, we have two interpreters who are helping us out today for this hour. Welcome you all. We will start now. So we're talking about RBM methodologies, but we are also greeting our key speaker today. I'll be presenting her very soon. And basically, for all of you joining us who were with Daniel's last week, we are going to be opening up and extending the previous discussion we had at that time. I would like to actually begin by acknowledging the land. I am in Montreal, Chochakin. This is the territory, unceded indigenous land, and we are visitors. in these lands. I would like to invite you all, and I will be sharing it with you in the chat. You can share where are you located, where are you connected from. You have native land, and I actually recommend this link. You can use it while you were recognizing your territories. So you can use it as a way to get to know which were the indigenous land you are located. And you can share in the chat where you connected so that Roxana also knows where you are based on. And this will give us a better understanding on who is connected and joining us. I'll briefly introduce the program, the Spirit Change program, for all of you who may not know about it. This is a 5-year initiative which is funded by Global Affairs Canada, aiming to increase the effectiveness of Canadian small and medium organizations. The SPOR program offers learning and knowledge sharing opportunities among several organizations through training sessions that we currently held throughout the year. We do not only hold training sessions or more formal training sessions, but we also have these open dialogues, these spaces where we learn from the others. It is not well structured, it is more like a chat, and basically that's the aim of today's session, to get to understand the methodologies by hearing Roxana's story. Some housekeeping rules. This webinar will be recorded. Please make sure to keep your microphones off at all times. If you want to speak, you can use the raise your hand button to indicate your desire to speak. You can find it at the bottom of your screen. You also already know the chat box. You can share your questions and comments in there, and we can try to use them in order to fit the discussion. And at the very end, we'll be sharing these slides with all of you. I have 3 other colleagues from the Support Change program who are helping us. We will be having a recording in Spanish, in English, and French, thanks to their support. Welcome you all once again. And I would like to thank Roxana Dulon, the speaker of today's session. She'll be talking about several actions of gender equity identified by the RBM methodology. Roxana, you have the floor now. You can introduce yourself, you can start your presentation, and put them aside. Thank you, Nico. Thank you for this brave introduction. I'm very pleased and happy to be with you in this space. I was looking at the chat and reading where you are connecting from. I am in Santa Cruz, Bolivia right now, and I just saw that we have someone from Sucre, which is another Bolivian city. It's very exciting to share with all of you and have the opportunity to have 3 languages available simultaneously. Thank you, Nico, for this great opportunity. Great. Thanks also, Sport Change, for that. I don't know whether you are able to share your screen right now or your presentation. You are now enabled to do so. Please, can you confirm if you can see what I'm sharing? Yes, we are actually looking at it. Perfect. Thanks. So I'll start by sharing this experience and how to use RBM methodology. We have used it and applied in a specific concrete project. The project is called Peces para la Vida, Fishes for Life, Empowerment and Sustainability. And this is a project that was executed through a consortium of four different institutions, two Canadian institutions and two Bolivian organizations. World Vision Trust is the Canadian organization leading the project, which is the one who manage funds and organize the whole consortium. We have also Royal Road University support, also from Canada, which is part of the project and provide the academic research support. And of course, that line of research that is important in the project. To have two other organizations, CEPAC, which is an NGO from Bolivia, mostly working in Santa Cruz. And with this project, it's spanning also its areas of influence, and a consulting agency, IMG, which is based in Cochabamba. So we have two Bolivian, two NGOs, one university, two Canadian organizations, a consultancy agency. It is a multi-diverse consortium thanks with the support of Canada. The Canadian government, it has gone through three different phases. We have Peces para la Vida, a second version, and this is the third version. So this is the opportunity for World Vision Trust actually get to know and understand Bolivian organizations work specifically on fish farming, research, and nowadays we are actually coordinating among the different institutions. So let me share with you that the ultimate goal or outcome by using the RBM methodology concepts aims at empowerment of women and families linked to fish farming productive, working specifically in 10 municipalities of Bolivia, 10 municipalities which are part of the Amazon basin. I'll be sharing with you this slide deck back. I try to use the whole logic and understanding of result-based management so that you familiarize with the terminology and probably understand that some of your projects also use this type of codes or logic as part of the ultimate and intermediate outcomes. You have as ultimate outcome the empowerment of women, but intermediate outcomes are the three that you can see in the chart. You have 100, it's focusing on strengthening equitable control to all different resources from the fish farming production. We also have another outcome where the aim is to increase participation of women in decision making in organizations related to fish farming production. And in the last intermediate outcome, we try to increase women's participation in national, municipal, regional, local institutions, specifically, once again, related to fish farming production. If we analyze these three intermediate outcomes, the first one provides us the best way to get involved with families, women that are working with fish farming. And the second intermediate outcome actually opens up to organizations, not only families. And in the last one, you are actually going to a public space, a political advocacy sphere where you look at the inclusion of gender and sustainable development of other institutions, not only family or groups and organizations. Now we are getting into a more complex scenario. We are not only adding ultimate and intermediate outcomes, but we're also adding immediate outcomes. If we follow the result based management methodology, we have these three levels of change. where we are committed at. Changes related to capacity building, skills, and immediate outcomes, behaviors, intermediate outcomes, and to have a change of status in the last ultimate level. So we have 7 outcomes, 7 immediate outcomes are listed in our project. I will comment on those so that you have a better understanding on what are we referring to when we aim at empowering women and family in this specific sector. So we have immediate outcomes related to strengthening skills for producers, entrepreneurs, women to manage their projects. We also have another output related to enhancing the abilities of women and youth, specifically related to production aspects. And finally, the enhancing or improving of skills related to marketing. So, management, production, and market processes. And we also have outcomes that are focusing on strengthening the leadership of gender skills. And you have one that is specifically talking about leadership. And the other one, the 1220, as you can read, the one that aims at strengthening skills and enhancing women and men basically on gender equity. And in the last column, you have 2 other immediate outcomes, basically on strengthening decision makers' capabilities so that gender sensitive economic development policies could be created, and also to raise awareness to promote sustainable development with gender equality approach. I use these first 3 slides to refer on this project on general terms, the logical model that we use. And for sure, you may know that this model also has the last part, the outputs, deliverables, right? The what will help the target population. I won't get into details of all the outputs, but we have 18 outputs in total for our specific proposal, but I would mention the 3 of them that you see highlighted in this slide because based on those outputs and based on the example uh, that I'll be sharing with you, I'll be sharing some of the outputs like 12, 11 is a gender approach used in specific training for best practices of fish production. We also provide support material to all different processes. Another output is to work on community workbook, as we call it, a lessons learned compilation created with the participation of women. Best practices
de poder,
a
posiciones de liderazgo en diferentes.
where leadership of women in several spheres could be shared. For instance, you can easily see what the project aims at and wants to change at outcomes and the outputs that I just shared, at least the 3 of them that I share with you. This is the project, but let's move on to our gender strategy now. Every project supported by that should have a gender strategy. Peces para la Vida is a gender project, so it is categorized as a 3-level project. This is a gender project and it has to develop its gender strategy. So, what is the gender strategy of the project and the ultimate outcome again aims at empowering women while also looking at reducing poverty levels and improving well-being. The ultimate outcome, it's always empowerment for our case. And if we get into a more concrete idea, there are four gaps of inequality that the project wants to review based on the analysis. Equal access to resources for fish production, either eh, education, training, financial, non-financial resources. Access is still unequal, and there are gaps of inequality identified on that specific access. Another intermediate outcome identified will try to improve equal access to both men and women to benefits of fish production. The second outcome refers to the exercising of economic rights of women, a change of practice and behavior so that economic rights of women are actually implemented. And a third huge issue we identified in the analysis of our gender strategy is that power relationships, which definitely impact women the most. Violence, discrimination of house, chores, stereotypes, and based on our strategy, of our gender strategy, we want those power relationships to be transformed. And finally, one last line related to institutional strengthening. To strengthen it based on a gender-based approach, so that institutions are enhanced by using and following the approach. We use an analysis-based gender that actually help us improve that approach. So basically what I have shared so far is the project, the logic model, by using the RBM methodology. And I also talk about the gender strategy working on gender equity. But let's move on to the next slide. Why we wanted to share this experience with all of you? We work on a specific tool to identify the outputs at the intermediate level. So what we actually want to change, concrete changes with this project. We develop quite an easy tool, a matrix, a two-entry matrix, which relate these 2 points. Intermediate outcomes, those results or changes based on our gender strategy towards the equality and the outputs, the main project outputs that we have developed in the logic model and in our matrix. While working on this specific tool, I'm just bringing back the outputs I mentioned, 1121, 1122, 1212. That's the first column. Those are the outputs of the project, the deliverables of the project. And in the first row, you have the four outcomes for the gender strategy. I also refer to equal access, exercise of economic rights, power relationships, and institutional strengthening. You may have used this matrix, a very similar matrix, to work on two concepts or two variables. The first question that may raise after looking at it is, which is the link in between outputs and outcomes? Let's recall, outputs are the concrete results, the deliverables to a population, a target population, services or concrete actions for the population. So if I relate 1121 with equal access, the question that we may ask ourselves to fill this out is, with training in gender responsive best practice of fishery production, can we do something to promote gender equality? If the answer is yes, we will just have it colored in yellow. If the answer is no, then it's left blank. Basically, can we actually work on that? Sometimes we can have a no, and if you have no in the other columns, you do not color them. This is the first analysis of the results. We can simply look at it and just say, okay, the column of institutional strengthening is blank, it's not colored. No, none of these outputs are actually leading to enhancing institutions or filling out this gap. So by easily looking at this, we can see that there are gaps, or you can see also the strengths, right? For instance, positive actions specifically related to equal access, exercise of economic rights, or power relationships related to 1212. Our first question was then how the concrete output of a project can help us actually fill any of those identified gaps. And the second level of analysis is not only to have it colored, but then write down which are the specific actions. We like this tool a lot because we can work on gender equity within the project. We use this framework, especially by looking at what to do. You don't think on gender in an abstract term. It is actually included in the project itself. It creates links in a very easy way. You can see the outputs and the outcomes, linkages and connections. And let me look at this. 1121, remember, it was training, capacity building. So, how a capacity building output that you may have probably in your projects, how can these help to have a better or equal access, for instance, by increasing practice of positive discrimination in favor of women? So that it actually follows that logic. In order to work on any specific training session, we need to specifically focus on a participation of women, equal or more participation of women, like in our project. Or another output related to training could also help us to identify gender gaps. If you want to have equal access as a goal, or an outcome, one of the main things that can help us is to identify which are those gender gaps. Or if we look at 1122, related to material, support material for all the different training sessions, how to prepare material could help to question power relationships. And if here you have one idea. Based on the training material provided by the project, we can actually increase awareness of questioning traditional gender roles. And our training material, we actually share photos, images, or we use language that goes beyond traditional gender roles. With that material, we are contributing to questioning those roles. Or how can we actually help on the exercise of economic rights for women? based on the material production. Well, we can do so
facilitando a que las mujeres se den cuenta que tienen el derecho
by
de elegir en qué quieren
telling
participar,
women that they
más
have the
allá de los
right
estereotipos
to
de género,
decide
y decidir en un
or
auténtico
choose
proceso
where to
voluntariado
participate
de
beyond
socialización.
gender
¿Cómo
stereotypes.
puede
So,
ayudarnos
how can a
a
tool
lograr estos cambios que
like that
queremos en términos de
can
género?
help to
Y aquí se
actually
trata de
create those
desarrollar el
gender
conjunto
changes?
T12,
And that's
que lo que va a tener
the
es
same
un
logic that
enfoque
applies
de
to
un
1212.
futuro que busquemos un feliz
Remember the
cambio
workbook, the
de éxito
book
de
that I was
género en
referring
nuestras
to,
vidas.
the community workbook?
Si lo relacionamos
If we
esta
look at
sistematización con
that
el acceso
specific
equitativo, esta
material with
sistematización nos va a
equal
ayudar a
access, that
identificar
will
cuáles
help
son
us
los obreros
identify which are
para
the
acceder
potential
a
barriers
controlar
for accessing
determinados
and
recursos.
controlling certain
Y de
resources.
esta manera, con esta relación
Likewise,
outputs
with
con
the
los
outputs
objetivos de
and
cambio que queremos lograr en términos de
outcomes
equidad de género, esta matriz nos sirvió
on
para
gender
construir.
equity, we gone through this
Lo
exercise.
bonito que nos
The
puede dar
nice
como
thing
resultado esta matriz
that we
es que
can
los indicadores,
identify
como ustedes pueden
throughout
ver,
this exercise
están identificados
is that
los
those are
outcomes inmediatos.
outcomes, immediate
Los
outcomes
cambios
can be easily
pequeños que
identified.
vamos a contribuir a
Those
lograr con el proyecto. Y
outcomes that will be
estos outcomes
easy
inmediatos,
to
estos
find.
temas identificados,
Those
son los que
specific points
permiten
are
que el
the
enfoque
ones
de
that
género
help us at gender
sea
equity
identificado
approach
dentro del proyecto, pero
be
además
included in the
siendo
project,
identificado y redactado
identified
en
in
el
the
orden
project, and
cronológico
drafted in the
en la
project
secuencialidad de
so that
perspectivas
it
y evaluados
creates a
en
way of
sistemas como
assessing
sería
them or
gestión basada en
use
inteligencia
further
artificial.
tools of RBM.
Eso es todo.
And that's it.
Fácil, ¿verdad?
Uh, Seems easy,
A ver
right?
si están ustedes pensando, vaya, pero qué fácil,
Maybe you think,
qué
well,
sencillo,
it
qué
sounds
simple.
quite easy, simple.
Estaría muy contenta
It
porque
would be
esta
great if you think so,
transversalidad
because that's
es
actually
algo que
what we
tiene que
wanted to
ver
share with you
trabajar en la
all.
transversalización del
That
enfoque de género
actually
desde la metodología de
cross-cutting gender
responsabilización
equity
a
by
través de
using
SMART
RBM
no es
tools
complicada
is
y
not
una herramienta
complicated at
como
all.
ejemplo
And a
una
tool
matriz
like
de doble
the
entrada
matrix that I
que
share
recupera el proyecto
that
y
actually
facilita
collects all
mucho
the
el
information that is
desarrollo
already
de
included
equidad
in the project,
en
enhance the
habilidades
logic of
laborales.
a different mindset, and help
Todo,
us work with the
capacitación
two
para
logics
identificar
with
y
the
un
RBM,
enfoque
results-based
de
management,
proyecto.
and the gender approach.
Roxana, muchas gracias.
Thank you,
Bueno,
Roxana.
creo que vi ciertas caras diciendo como,
I don't know whether everybody thought it was that easy or not, just by looking at
pero
the faces.
es un buen ejemplo
But it
y
is actually a really
siento
good
que
example,
deberíamos
and I
ayudar
believe that we should actually
rápidamente
clarify some
esas
of the
dudas que
questions
tienen
that we may have. We have
frente al
gone through
computador
a
y creo
month
que
of
es entendible
training
que
on
no hay un
RBM,
buen sistema y que
and
todo el
there's no
proceso cambia
best or ideal
de cada
project. Every
proyecto.
or every tool,
Entonces,
sorry,
la idea es
it
como
changes
hacer
depending on the project. So
los métodos
tools
y
are there,
metodologías son
methodologies that are
adaptables
used can
a
be
los
adapted
contextos
to the
naturales, a
context,
la
to a
población con la
specific
que
population, to a
trabajamos.
specific context you're
Y
working on.
tenemos una actividad en grupo, pero yo sé que hay
And there
preguntas.
is
Y si
a,
tienen más preguntas, por favor, pueden utilizar
group
el chat.
activity, but I don't know if there are
Inicio con una
questions.
pregunta
Jenny, I think you have a
de
question.
colega.
Do you
Tengo
want
dos
to say
preguntas.
something? I actually have two questions.
A esta matriz llegaron después de cuántos
So, how long does it take to develop this
proyectos
matrix? How many
hicieron
projects you had
y si
before?
les sirvió
Eh,
porque
Did
estamos
you use it?
en la elaboración de una base
Because
de
we are
datos
now working on
pues
a new
actualizada,
project
¿verdad?
ourselves, and I love it.
Qué bonito,
Congratulations! It is
la
great. It's a
presentación
lovely tool.
la veo como
But
que
I
le
just
podemos
wonder,
explicar a
it
nuestros
can be very
participantes qué
useful
pasa
just
en
to
el futuro
adjust a
proyecto cuando
proposal
se
in a
termine.
future project, right?
Y una segunda
And
pregunta
another
es
question,
que
if you allow me to,
tú hablabas de tres, ustedes tuvieron tres ejes,
you
pero
were
cuando hacen
talking
una
about the
analítica
different
hacen
axes, the
sobre
two
cuatro cosas.
lines, but
Esa
you're
relación de
actually
los ejes,
using
no me acuerdo
outputs.
cómo se llama,
I don't
metodología
know. I don't
orientada,
remember the names though, but
los
I think you
outcomes
said
y las cuatro.
outcomes.
Entonces
You
tendrían
had four
tres sin cada
outcomes, but you
intermediario,
have
¿cierto?
three
Entonces
intermediate
ahí es un tipo como que no
outputs.
entiendo
So
bien
I didn't
qué quiere decir
understand
bien,
based on
que son
what you
cuatro, que son
define
tres
what are three or four, or how many do you use? I don't know whether you understand my question. Was it clear? Okay. Nico, do we collect questions now, or should I answer to this question now? Maybe you can briefly answer these questions. There's another one in the chat. Well, two in the chat. But let's just, I think we have two, but let me say, do said that the statistics in relation to the autonomy of women were included in the process. I think maybe I'll just give the floor to Seydu to actually explain a little bit further. And I think Carrie has to question another question as well. She wrote it in the chat, but maybe we can start with Jenny and then we can give the floor to Seydu and Carrie later on. Okay? Okay. Thanks, Nico, and thanks, Jenny, for your questions. Well, after how many projects, or well, this is a first project actually. It was our first project, and we were able to develop this matrix when we were thinking on the gender strategy. I think the same project, or at the very beginning, when we were thinking on the gender strategy, we were thinking on how this strategy could be aligned to what the project was aiming at, right? So we were reflecting and looking at several ways of trying to interconnect both, and the matrix help us to set the limits and try to work with the project and the strategy and link those two together. So if you see, you have the outcomes and the outputs. Maybe let me go back to this part so that you understand better how we divide it. So we have these two entries, these two lines, right? X and Y. And it can have as many columns as per the project requirements. For instance, uh, if we look at all the outputs of the project, all the output, it is important to include all the outputs because it's the concrete action based on the project. For us, we have 18 outputs. We have 18 lines. The example I showed only had three, but we had 18. Okay, if you have 12, 18, you need to include all. In the first column, you include all the outputs, no matter the number. And in the rows, you have the outcomes, the gender equity outcomes. So in our case, we had four. Those were the ones that we had in our strategy: equal access, exercise of economic rights, power relationships, and institutional strengthening. So, your matrix, if you want to work on a similar matrix, you can use two, three, five gender equity outcomes and the outputs that you have in your own project. Okay, so that's the connection, and that's how you work on columns and rows. Okay, that was a nice explanation. It makes it clear. I think I hear myself during training several questions. Now, how do you implement that approach in our projects? This is an easy way by just simply comparing the columns. It's just like a game, right? That's part of the activity that we want to work on the small groups. Yes, and decisions that you need to make, right? And how to define the outputs for your project and the gender equity outcomes. That is part of the main core of the project. This is a tool that helps interconnect both. And on the questions related to statistics, Nico, I did not actually understood it. Maybe we can ask for a clarification, but maybe I can share something before that. The project has a baseline, and in the baseline, we actually identify certain equity inequality gaps, access, lack of access to economic resources, information gaps, or opportunities, training opportunities for women. So we identified gaps related to resources access or equal access once again for economics rights. We also identify several gaps on property ownership or the use of resources. So how do we identify those gaps? They are supported with statistics of the project, but also statistics on our context. For instance, power relationships, violence numbers, right? Unfortunately, in our country, we have three higher levels of women violence, and you have regional and local indicators that allow us to identify those gaps of power relationships and
Quería solamente agregar, Seidu
Say do. I don't know whether that actually answered your question. So, do you want to clarify? Do you want to comment?
Oui, voilà. Donc, je voulais d'abord remercier Roxana par rapport à sa
First of all, I would like to thank
Elle a
Roxana
en partie
for her
répondu puisque
presentation. I
effectivement
think
le
she
dispositif
answered
parce que
somehow. I
le
asked the
projet c'est un
question
projet de
because the
domination
project
depuis des femmes de façon globale. Alors, moi,
i-
j'aimerais juste
it's a
savoir est-ce que
global one,
dans
but I
ce
just want to
projet, vous avez
know
eu
whether in
de
this
veille à
project you
identifier
had
un certain nombre de femmes qui ont fait des
identified a
projets
number of
grâce à
women
qui
that
les
were
femmes
able to
se lèvent le matin
develop
et qui aujourd'hui
um,
sont autonomes.
more
Voilà,
economic
donc je
incomes
voudrais
and are
juste un peu
more
par rapport
autonomous right now. So
à cette
based
thématique,
on the
est-ce que vous pouvez
numbers
nous
that
en
you
dire
have identified,
plus?
do you have real
Merci.
cases of women that are empowered that were actually developing more activities in that specific sector? Thanks for your question. Yes, fish farming is a productive activity that is closely related to women roles naturally uh, because normally the ponds are nearby the households. Women start working by following gender role distribution. And fish farming had a great potential for income creation, uh, environmentally friendly, so it was not creating any issues related to land, tenure, and women organize themselves in the field. So basically, with fish farming, we want to empower women. Why do we say so? Because we see lots of women actually participating in fish farming, but we do not see many women making decisions on fish farming, which is different. And since it is actually a profitable and environmentally friendly job, is socially new for the country, we believe that fish farming could actually help empower women. And specifically in phase three of this project, we have actually women, several women that actually share their positive success stories due to the development in this area, empower women in public spaces. So yes, it is true. We believe that we can help empower women through this industry.
y una última pregunta
And
que ya
finally, a
mencionaste
question that was
sobre
already included by Carrie in the
que preguntaba si
chat.
usted
Well, I think you
asumía
somehow touched.
supuestamente actividades asociadas
No, she said, I assume there are activities associated with the
las
outputs of in the
actividades que
matrix, right?
conlleva
So
lo que
at
has
the
presentado.
activities or things that you have shared. Yes, exactly. Yes. We created the links in between outputs and the gender equity gaps, or what we call the intermediate outcomes. But of course, in a development, each output has its own activities, and you can have more and more ideas on how the connection is in between an output and a gap.
O sea, tenemos varias
I think that
maneras
there
de
are
responder.
lots of
Entonces,
people raising their
empecemos
hands.
con Zeina.
Saying,
Colin,
Pauline first. Colleen?
Colin.
Colleen, you want to ask a question?
Merci beaucoup, Roxana, pour cette...
Thanks, Roxana, for this great presentation. I just have a question. Have you used this tool to present this to the women of the project, to present it to the women that were part of the project so that they actually use it and use the different approaches or to complement what you have identified? So if this was also shared with women so that they can actually reflect and participate in that reflection on that part of the assessment of the project on that specific approach? Thanks. Thank you, Colleen. No, we are not at that phase yet. But actually, your question actually makes us reflect on how this tool could actually be helpful to share with women part of the project. So we will use it to socialize it with the women in the project. And maybe I just want to highlight something that I probably forgot to mention before, the use of icons. Help us share the changes. In our country, we will be working with lots of women that are not illiterate, but maybe they do not necessarily are good at reading or it's not part of their common practice. So this matrix will be also translated in symbols, right? We're not using necessarily words or maybe icons like empowerment, so that they actually reflect more. But thanks for your question, Colleen. That's something that I will note down because it will be a great recommendation on how we can share this matrix to share it and try to involve more and more women. Thanks. That's great. That's a really good question. Thank you. I would like to know, sign up, which is your question?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Roxana. That reminds me my first international development education. We studied Bolivia. So my question is, since Bolivia is a big country and Canada has been involving a lot, especially a city called Chakino. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly. There we studied about Bolivia's movement. My question is like, is it covered with your project in terms of women? Is it covered the whole country or is just a specific city that you're working with the women? And how do you, just like this one, it's really helpful to us. And how do you write your proposal to what, if it's the same method you use to write your proposal for you to get funding for this project?
Gracias, Ainab, qué gusto saber.
Thanks, Ainab. It's great that you were interested in Bolivia and that you to know this is a project to be executed in 10 out of more than 300 municipalities. So this will be only focalized in 10 of 2 departments. So it is a limited scope, and it is not necessarily a bigger farming. It's tropical fish farming, basically in the Amazon basin. So this is a specific area where we are based in what we're working on. And just to work on the project, to develop the project, we use this methodology, we use this tool. And but where we actually learn to use it is while preparing the implementation plan. There was a time for the project to get into this specific implementation phase. So then, by that time, we learned more and a lot about this tool, and we were actually implementing it and using with the gender strategy that I mentioned. And something very similar, uh, also place while using our environmental strategy. So we follow the same logic.
How do you see with others who are not in your project? What kind of pressure do you have? Are they taken as a discrimination, or how do you fit in with the society? For those who are not in your those that you haven't covered yet, as you said, the community is only 10 of these women are participating in your project. So those who are not in that project, how do you fit in that?
Well, the selection of the different municipalities had to do with the specific emphasis on the fishing farming, and the selection of the municipalities also had gone through several criteria. We have had even 3 municipalities where participation of women was key, was relevant, and it actually show how women were actually able to empower themselves with this type of projects, to lead organizations and lead social companies. And we find really nice examples, concrete examples to be used and follow. But there are other areas, numerous areas where fish farming grew up to a certain extent, but there was no gender approach or gender inclusiveness. And women participation is simply feeding the fish or selling the fish in the market, but they're not necessarily playing an important role in any decision-making spaces, and they do not have access to training, for instance. Of course, we have seen women saying, yes, women are only there to feed fish. And when we ask them, why aren't they here? Because they say, well, they are actually working, they're feeding the fish. They cannot come to training because they're doing their job. So that there is a very specific place or areas where women are actually acting, doing stuff, but they're not making decisions. Empowerment is very low, but we have another area where fish farming will develop more and more, and where we are actually focusing on, we want to have a planned development and organized development, and that keep that gender equity in mind and do not leave women aside. That's the main difference then. That's a great discussion. I think that I'm learning a lot, not only about the matrix and the tool itself, but how a project actually focus on a specific area. Sometimes you have a country project, a specific regions, but how do you actually divide and think on where to focus because of social, economic, cultural aspects that could be playing an important role? We're almost getting up to the hour. 8 minutes are left. Unfortunately, we weren't able to put the matrixing to practice, but I don't know if there are other questions. Il- Limbert? Lambert? Limbert? Limbert? Hi, Roxana. It's more out of curiosity rather than a question, but as part of the outcomes or in intermediate and immediate outcomes, are you thinking on including men? It's a way of empowering women to try to achieve those goals. Are you thinking on involving men in the process? Well, it's just a question, or out of curiosity, whether you're actually thinking on including men. Thank you for your question, Limbert. The project has mixed population, and indicators and our goals or outcomes have a gender disaggregation. It's very clear. For instance, training. training is open for 70% of women, but also men. If this immediate outcome, the 1220 specifically refers to training for both men and women to promote the gender approach. No, 1220, sorry. I think it is important that not only women um, are aware, trained, and are trained to be leaders, to have important roles. It is also as important having men to empower, to be fathers, brothers, towards development with the focus of gender. So yes, there are concrete challenges for men, especially to try to help on empowering women.
Qué bueno, qué bueno.
Thanks. That's great.
Otra vez, otro punto crítico, yo creo que
I
dentro de
think
esta
another
metodología
important
y en base a un
point
poco
for this
todo esto que se recae
methodology
dentro de una
and
matriz
how they sum up and
donde los
create this huge
componentes
matrix, right?
dentro
How do you
de
include
palabras, ¿no?
these with words in this matrix? I think
El
sometimes I
desafío
feel that
o
that's
la situación
challenging,
que nos
right? In
ponemos
the
es
past training
cómo,
we held,
cómo
we've
yo
been
elaboro
discussing on
un
how do I actually
presupuesto, que
prepare
todo esto esté
something
conciso,
so that
claro,
everything is
pensar que sea
concise, but it's
sintetizable,
clear, is to have short
decir,
sentences,
tengo
quite
tanta claridad
concrete,
de qué es lo que
straightforward,
necesita decir la
clear to
organización,
understand. But I think
toma
that
eso punto a
many
punto,
of
pensar
the
qué es lo
thoughts
que
that we have
realmente
shared
necesito. No solamente
more
difícil,
mostly
pero también
lead to that point. It
es
is hard,
crear
yes,
y trabajar
but we need
en
to
ese
work
contexto.
with communities.
Siento que si
I
quieres,
also
Roxana,
feel, I don't know,
con lo poco
Roxana,
que tenemos de tiempo,
because
podemos
of
hacer algo que es
the
como
time, what
demostrar
you
una
can do
actividad
is
y la
to
podemos hacer
share the
dentro
activity so that people
dentro de
can
estos
do it by
dentro de este
themselves
tiempo.
whenever they want to. If they, yes, that would be a great idea. Maybe you can share what we were supposed to do, and maybe you can use it in your project in a reflection space for the preparation of the project when you were working on the follow processes or even for assessment. Veronica will be sharing that part. Veronica,
Espero que para la mayoría estén de
hopefully
acuerdo.
everything agrees with that. We have 4 minutes
Claramente la
left. Will that
planeación
be
que
okay?
lo
I
elaboramos
definitely recommend it.
juntos
We prepare it, we
con
work
la
on
ayuda de
it
Roxana,
with
así
the
que
support of
voy a
Roxana. So
compartir
it
mi
will be
pantalla
great
con
if you have the
ustedes
time. I'll be
rápido.
sharing my screen so that you know what I'm talking about. Okay.
¿Pueden ver la matriz?
I think you can see it now. Yes. Can you confirm? Yes. Maybe to explain what was the idea of this specific exercise. I don't think we can do it now live, but at least I can try to explain how we thought of it, and maybe you can do it by yourself later. So for this specific activity, this is the same matrix that Roxana shared as an example during the presentation, but we have added more examples from our outputs and our logic model. And what we did is to write down the immediate outcomes, as you can see. So this is the draft proposal that you can have by looking at the gender strategy gaps that were identified. So as a group, you were to review the matrix with the outputs and outcomes, no, and try to identify errors because we included errors in the specific examples. So you were to adjust the review and try to identify the errors and how do you change it. So basically by following the RBM approach and the ultimate outcome. and also the gender strategy. So basically, the idea was to review this, to identify the errors, and try to reformulate new proposals and the analysis that you should have had in the groups. But well, this is something that you can do it probably internally. I don't know how you are organized. Unfortunately, we do not have that time now, but well, I suggest uh, for those of you who are still with us, what I will do via a spur change, I'll try to clean this up, this matrix, and I'll be sending it via an email so you can have the PPT, you'll have Roxana's presentation, and you'll have the recording if you want to have access to it, if your colleagues, if your peers would like to hear it, and this matrix. So I will do so. Maybe you can do this collectively with your peers, with your
Lo cambian de tal manera que ustedes piensan que sea mejor.
friends, so that you can actually change or work on the errors and try to fill it out. And you can even resend it to us. You can download it, you can fill it out, and with Roxana, we can look whether you identify those errors or not. What do you think, Roxana? Yes, yeah. And then you have the emails, our emails at the end of the presentation that you will receive. So if you have any questions, you can contact us. In the
Clara
last
Pimentel.
slide of the PowerPoint, you can find our contact, our emails, and you can ask any questions that you may have. Great, that's brilliant. Perfect. We are about to.
Hacer, bueno, un reconocimiento del tiempo de Roxana, del equipo de Peces por la Vida de Worldwide Fisheries, que es la organización basada en Canadá. Em, y rápidamente, para seguir esta conversación acerca de
It will be great just to let you know exactly what will come next. So we'll have
quién está en la charla, quién
Ray
está con nosotros.
today.
Reyes
Ray,
es la actriz de Beautiful World.
she's a director from Beautiful World, Canada, and she will be the next speaker next week. And there will be another, let's chat, another activity, another good example
Esta misma hora.
story. So keep connected, get connected next time, next week. And if you have any questions, please share it with me, or you can send it directly to Roxana if you wish so. So thanks once again to be in this session. It was a great learning. Thank you and enjoy your day. Take care. Bye. Thank you. Happy